I'm not trying to, be contrary or whatever, but it's a travesty because we have these so-called professionals out here who are just they're interested in just taking the money, and
Mhm.
they cut steps, and they and also I'll even say something a little bit more controversial. I think we have a responsibility as the experts in the room to push back on clients a little bit when they don't want us to go to those extra steps to ensure that we're going to give them what they need. And I have had to push back on that before and say, you know what, I hear what you're saying. You think that you need training. I'm telling you that based on my preliminary assessment, you do not have a training issue. You've got a management problem. You've got a business process need that has to be tweaked. You may have
Mhm.
an HR problem. You might have a morale issue. There are so many different things that contribute to performance gaps that have nothing to do with training.
Strategy is standard, but leading people, that's where the magic happens. In every organization, there comes a moment, a shift, a stretch, a choice. How do you help your people thrive? Give them the voice, the tools, and the leadership they deserve.
I'm Rhonda.
And I'm Kevin.
Welcome to the Wolfpack Rise and Howl podcast, where we talk about what it takes to lead, coach, and transform from the inside out.
Hey everyone, welcome to the next episode of the Wolfpack Rise and Howl podcast. Good morning, Kevin. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Rhonda. I am doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm good. So,
Great.
as per usual, what I always start off with, I got a bone to pick.
And I know you do.
So, this week I wanted to talk about training, and more specifically, especially coming on the heels of that meeting that we had the other day when I was trying to, give an explanation of, what to look for when hiring a learning and development consulting company. And I first thought about this topic of wanting to talk about training even before we had that call. As we had talked about what are we going to, go over this week. And so it was just completely coincidental that that call came in, and, we ended up having those discussions with that gentleman. The first thing that I wanted to start off with is to talk about a time when I worked for a company several years ago. I want to say we're coming up on it's close to 20 years ago that I had a brief stint at a company before I just couldn't ignore the spidey sensors anymore, and I got the hell up out of there. But what they were doing was passing off really super slick, awesome graphics and motion graphics and animated whiz bang boom content as instructionally sound learning. And oh gosh, it was a hot mess. So, this is kind of a conversation that I want to put out there for the audience. If anybody's out there who's, thinking about hiring someone to develop training for them, I wanted to talk about some things to be on the lookout for. So I want to dig into that little story first, and then we can lead into some other stuff, because since you and I had that meeting last week, something else came up on the radar, which I was going to talk about as well, which I'll get into that in a minute. But I want to talk a little bit about AI and how that's being used in different ways. Some ways are good, and some ways are just an outright misuse of AI. So,
Mhm.
first things first, just because something's really pretty and very cool looking and interesting and seemingly engaging does not mean that it's instructionally sound. And the reasons that I'm going to give for this are actually going to tie directly into the things that I'm going to talk about with relation to AI in a little bit later. So in this particular company that I'm talking about, there was a person there who had a background in art. They went to art school and they were quite an accomplished motion graphics animator. You know, they did some really cool, slick work. I mean, there's no doubt about that. They were absolutely very, very skilled and talented in that. But as often was the case back in the early 2000s, people started to realize that there was a lot of money in instructional design and e-learning development, and a lot of people started to jump on that bandwagon and they wanted a piece of that pie. So here came the graphic designers and the Sunday school teachers. I think that was your comment. And you know, and then also as the rise of rapid development tools continue to grow, and some of the tools that had been pretty sophisticated and rather complicated in the past, some of which were more geared towards enterprise level learning, learning needs. They became more user friendly. Their prices came down, so a lot more tools became more readily accessible to individuals, which is super cool. That's awesome. However, it also inadvertently fueled this perception that just because you know how to work that tool means that you are also now all of a sudden a skilled instructional designer. So let's dig into the graphic stuff first. So there was a little story where this, and I'm not naming names, okay, but anybody out there who's listening, there's one person who might be listening who will know what I'm talking about because they were there. So, but anyway, this is a case where there was a pretty high profile client that needed training. And so this individual that I told you about who came to this learning department of this company that I worked at, he landed that client by really jazzing them with this really slick demo of this animated cooler. So basically, this was the client was a fast food chain, and they said they needed training to help people learn how to handle catering orders. Okay, apparently there was some kind of a something wasn't going well or something like that. So the answer was not to create cool spinning coolers and put out a bunch of information about it. Now that I'm not a stick in the mud. I'm not an unfun person. I love beautiful graphics, but it sits behind real, true, thorough instructional design work, because had this person done a proper needs analysis, they would have learned very quickly that that client didn't actually need training. They needed an improvement on a business process that was broken and just, I wouldn't even say it's broken. It just needed to be tweaked a bit, right? Mm-hmm. So they got sold this big, expensive project to put together all this beautiful stuff, but it didn't solve the problem. Because the problem didn't lie in a lack of knowledge and skills. So tip number one for the audience out there, make sure that you look at any proposals from any instructional design consulting companies through a lens of this question. Do these learning objectives close a knowledge and skills gap? Meaning, does the person really absolutely positively not know how to do this thing? Okay? And if the answer is no, then you do not need training. And you need to look elsewhere to figure out what the root cause of the performance gap is. So you don't waste your money and your time and annoy your employees, making them take training that they don't need, because then that's going to have a whole bunch of other implications. It kind of dampens morale, and it's just silly. Okay. And it's just annoying and frustrating, and it just wastes, people don't like to have their time wasted. Even if they're being paid to go to training, if a person can figure out that they don't really need that and it's an inefficient use of their time, people don't like to have their time wasted, even if they're being paid for it. I promise you that. So that was like the first thing that came to my mind when I was thinking about wanting to do this as a topic, because I think that if you don't know the difference, you can get taken. If someone comes with some really flashy, cool looking, ooh, look at this, but you've got to understand what is the core of the curriculum. What performance gap are we trying to close? And is training the appropriate intervention for that? I have seen so many companies throw tons of money at training, and they didn't need that. They needed something completely different. So that's the first story. It kind of pissed me off, to be honest with you, back during the time when it was happening, because I feel like it just degrades the value of our community as learning professionals when we have people who, I call them charlatans. I mean, this person's hopefully has learned and availed themselves to some education so that they can do better. But at the time, they were just a straight up charlatan, because it was just a money grab. They saw an opportunity to make a lot of money, and they were able to convince this company to buy their sparkly, wiggly, jiggly thing that they sold them that didn't solve a damn thing.
Yeah, yeah. And Rhonda, if I could just,
Yeah.
I think the optimum term that you used, and you referenced it a couple of times, was root cause. And
Yeah.
so, shame on the customer, though, for not being able to recognize that perhaps this new shiny, thing in the form of training or whatever was not going to be the answer. Perhaps if they had, prior to those conversations, identified really what the source of the issues were. Um, you know,
Kevin, I want to interject real quick, because yeah,
mhm,
you've made a really good point, but respectfully, I'm just going to push back just a little bit, because
mhm,
that's our job. Whenever, I don't expect a client to know, they just know they got a problem. If they're not skilled in performance consulting and they don't understand how to even do a root cause analysis, this is a restaurant. They know how to make food. That's
true,
their
true that.
specialty. They're
As the
reaching,
kids would say, true that.
yeah, no cap or whatever. Is that the um so I hear what you're saying, and yeah, it's easy
Yeah.
to and tempting to want to say that, well, they should have known, but well, if they knew that, then why would they need to hire people like us? You
Right.
know?
Well, I was thinking in terms of no. You're absolutely right, Rhonda. Especially considering the nature of the business client.
Mm-hmm.
They they're in the food business. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of an organization, maybe some kind of white collar organization that you know might be adept at figuring out issues, problems, or whatever, figuring out the root cause or whatever. But
And
you're absolutely right, and not everybody's going to have the ability to do that.
I want to comment on that too, because even in the case of a white collar, maybe it's a finance, or it's, a consulting company or whatever, like a the big five or something like that. Well,
Hmm.
yeah, I would expect those people to know that they need to look at these things, but I still wouldn't expect them to be the experts in how to actually do it. So yeah,
Right.
maybe I would expect there to be a little bit more base knowledge from a client like that, depending on the type
Hmm.
of company that they are. But as a performance consultant and learning development specialist, I never make that assumption, and I always take on the ownership myself, because anything that I'm delivering to the client, I take ownership of making sure that the foundational components are there. So even if they say we've already done our needs analysis, I'm going to ask for those findings, and I'm still going to validate their findings. Because if
Sure.
I'm building something based on their findings, I want to validate and make sure that they are correct, because I take it very seriously that the deliverables that we give them are going to be measurable, and then they're actually going to effectively close that gap.
Hmm.
So, but I mean, and I don't, I'm not trying to, be contrary or whatever, but it's a travesty, because we have these so-called professionals out here who are just, they're interested in just taking the money, and
Hmm.
they cut steps, and and also, I'll even say something a little bit more controversial. I think we have a responsibility as the experts in the room to push back on clients a little bit when they don't want us to go to those extra steps to ensure that we're going to give them what they need. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I have had to push back on that before and say, you know what? I hear what you're saying. You think that you need training. You think that it's just going to be bada bing, bada boom. I'm telling you that based on my preliminary assessment, you do not have a training issue. You've got a management problem. You've got a business process need that has to be tweaked. You may have a capacity problem. You may not have enough people to actually be able to effectively fulfill their job duties. You may
Hmm.
have an HR problem. You might have a morale issue. There are so many different things that contribute to performance gaps that have nothing to do with training,
Yeah,
you
and oh,
know?
by the way, I might be able to help you with that, but not necessarily, providing you with a full-fledged training program. That's not necessary. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the difference between doing a performance like you can provide performance support,
Hmm.
and that can come in in the shape of different things. That could be, hey, maybe you just need job aids. Maybe some kind of demos might help, but training is applicable when the people just really don't have the knowledge and skills to do the thing that you're asking them to do.
Right.
Period. Period. So, that's why I get my red up about that, and I get a bone to pick with these folks that are out here. They're just selling. I don't begrudge any business to sell their services. That's what we're here for. Everybody's got to be, you know, they've got to survive, but please have some integrity about yourself. And yeah, so that was one story.
Hmm.
There's another one too. Different, completely different company, different time. In this situation, really was difficult. So I was asked to take the lead on doing a needs analysis this was internal for a company that I worked at
Hmm.
that outsourced their customer service jobs to, I think, India at the time. Okay. So, call center agents, right?
Hmm.
So, when you call on the phone back in the day when we used to be able to call on the phone, now I got to deal with these chat bots. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Talk about another time. Hate those damn things. But anyway, back during the time, way once, long, long time ago, when you used to actually be able to pick up the phone and get a person on the other end, they would have these tools that the call center agents would have to use to try to troubleshoot a technical problem, something of that nature. And so, and for those out there who understand how call center metrics work, there's such a thing as average handle time, meaning don't be on the phone too long. First call resolution, Let's not have the customers be calling back about the same problem because you're going to get dinged for that. And all these metrics weigh in, and they are determining factors for whether or not that call center company gets to keep the contract with the company that they're providing these services for. And they also, in this case, tied directly to the pay of each call center person, the agents that were answering the phones. So here's a little story. So the problem was that the customer satisfaction ratings were on the decline. So what's going on? Okay, so the assumption was made that, oh, well, these call center agents, they must not know how to troubleshoot. They must not be doing their jobs. They need training.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the needs analysis, and it was very thorough. And lo and behold, it came back absolutely positively. Everybody knew how to do their job. Okay. Even the managers that oversaw the call centers that were stateside, who oversaw the management at the call center locations in India or the Philippines, they would even be able to confirm, like, no, they completed all the training. Everybody took the training. Everybody passed. So having conversations with folks and digging deeper, come to find out those folks were tied to a pay incentive at 30% of their pay being directly tied to average handle time rates. So what do you think that means? Let me hurry up and get you off the damn phone as fast as possible.
Exactly. I knew you were going there. Mm-hmm.
Well, what compounded the problem was that this particular tool that the company provided for them to use to troubleshoot was a bit cumbersome. And they also held them to these standardized scripts that they had to use, which is normal. That's cool. Mm-hmm. But the process and the tool was clunky. The process wasn't very quick. And so what do you think they did? They would just rush and just guess and just that, they would just, I don't know what those conversations sounded like, where they just would, how they came about trying to get people off the phone as fast as possible. So if you're a customer on the receiving end of that, do you think you're going to give a good customer service rating to the company? No. So there you go. That's what was causing the customer satisfaction ratings to drop, was customers were pissed off because they weren't getting their problem solved. But they weren't getting their problem solved because some poor call center person was getting the whip cracked on them, like, get off the phone, because if you don't get these AHT times within the margins, we're going to dock your pay. To further exacerbate the problem, another finding that came out in the needs analysis is that the company pressured the call center agency and threatened them, like, if you don't get these metrics in line, we may not renew our contract with you. So what do you think that happened? That in turn happened after that. They then applied pressure to the call center agents. Imagine just being in a boot camp, just walking up and down and, standing over people's shoulders and grilling them about get off the phone. So do you see what a cluster pluck this was?
Sure.
Meanwhile, we're being forced to create training that we know darn well is not needed. Training is not going to fix any of this. You need to get real about adjusting your metrics. You need to stop pressuring them and then making their pay a factor of AHT. Maybe you need to look at fixing your tool to make it a lot more efficient. Maybe you need to adjust your average handle time expectations, considering that you do have a tool that's clunky and your process is a little bit slow. So rather than, just getting all hot and heavy about, wanting to do all this training, they should have analyzed their internal themselves first. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so that's another instance of where training was absolutely misused. And So those were the first two things that I was wanting to talk about. But now, what do those two things have in common? They have in common a lack of analysis to determine an actual root cause of what's going on. Okay. The second thing is that they also failed to really take a close look at how the training that we were supposedly going to create was going to connect directly to strategic business objectives. And you heard me talk about this the other day on our call, where I let that gentleman know for sure, no matter what you do, make sure that whoever you're talking to, they're talking about these things.
Right.
Okay. The other thing that was lacking in both of those situations was a desire to measure this training. It was just all about getting it out, cranking it out as fast as possible, shoving it down people's throats, making them take it, making it mandatory, and literally kind of beating them over the head with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, there's this analogy that a client of mine uses. I love it, so I'm gonna steal it from them. It's like, once you have a hammer, you run around and all of a sudden everything is a nail.
Yeah, I've heard that one. Yeah.
Training is not the hammer, okay? Don't treat everything like a nail. So it's just, so it just completely fails to even, and nobody in both of those cases, nobody in the first case with the dancing cooler, there was no element of analysis whatsoever that was employed at all. Not on the strategic organizational level. No learner analysis. No content analysis. No, because I don't recall that there was even a question. Are you sure you don't already have training that exists that could solve this problem? Just none of that. Just sold a bunch of dancing, moving graphics that were cool but not instructionally sound. Right? So, and in both of these cases, though, they just completely dismissed the needs of the learners in question. And if there's one thing that I can say, I'm going to preach to the rooftops is, you always have to keep your learners in mind. They are the focus. Okay, first, strategic business objectives. What are we trying to accomplish? How is this training going to connect to helping you, operate better and get on with your business of things? Because training is a very powerful asset to help companies perform better when it's appropriate for doing so. So if you're a widget making company, whatever, everybody has to know how to make the widgets. They need to know how to maintenance the widgets. They need to know how to sell the widgets. They need to be trained on how to actually effectively perform the job tasks necessary in order for your business to operate. So training absolutely is appropriate for that, generally speaking. But when you leave out the learner, what are we doing here, folks? Because especially in larger companies, you will have learner groups that play different roles. Not everybody needs to take all of the same type of training all the time. I remember being forced to, oh God, this is years and years ago. I remember being forced to sit through SAP training at a company that I worked at. That thing is a behemoth. It's a behemoth tool. It's, it does freaking everything soup to nuts. But why does I was at the time I was in like the buying department. Why does the receptionist, or why does the lady in HR, or why does whatever random role need to understand how to use SAP to perform warehouse functions? We don't work in the warehouse. We don't do do you know what I'm saying? And why do the guys in the warehouse need to understand how to process payroll. They don't do that. So they literally had everybody sitting through every single aspect of training. And it was
Yeah.
just so annoying. And I will tell you, one thing too that people fail to kind of recognize is that the attention span of a learner is absolutely important, because if a learner gets distracted and they check out, they're not learning. They're just dreaming about when's lunchtime, when's the end of the day coming, when can I get the hell out of here? This is completely irrelevant to me and my job.
Just there to check a box.
Yeah, so that those are like the big things that I wanted to bring up first. And so how does that,
So
yeah.
Rhonda, yeah. If I could jump in, I could, but because I don't want us to get too far away
Yeah.
from it before I'm able to make a comment about it. You brought up a couple of times where the miss is, in terms of going down that path, seeking training where it perhaps is not necessary. You mentioned that oftentimes organizations fail to do some form of analysis, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
to form the opinion, to arrive at, hey, this is the issue, and the solve is training or whatever. It's because they did not do the analysis. And I've worked in organizations where they thought that they understood that training was needed because of analysis that was performed, but the analysis was flawed because the right data wasn't sought after, if you will, or even analyzed, even if they had the right data, or the data was skewed or whatever. So I've seen that. I've been close to it, and but oftentimes it's not just the fact that they failed to do the analysis. They failed to do the analysis correctly, or they did not have the correct data or understand how to analyze the data that they had before them. So I just wanted to make that point as well.
That's actually an excellent point, and you remind me of another thing that happens sometimes too. Is this is sometimes, and this is going to sound so ridiculous, because it sounded completely ridiculous to me as well. I when I was in graduate school, I was having a conversation with one of my professors about, why do companies spend all this money in, like, when they don't have to, because I was kind of frustrated, and I had a pretty nice relationship with this professor, a good rapport, and sometimes we would just chat, and I asked her, I was like, because I was already working in the field when I was getting my master's degree, and had been for a while. And I was like, I'm just so darn frustrated. It's like I do these proposals, I do the needs analysis, I give them the findings, and I do make the proper recommendation that's not training. And I even point out to them they can save a bunch of money. They can save
Mm-hmm.
money if they don't do this training that they don't need. They can save
Mm-hmm.
the company money and time. And you know what she told me? And let me tell you, just burst my little bubble, man. She's like, "Oh yeah, I've been a consultant for X number bunch of years, And she said sometimes they have their own agenda. So if
Mm-hmm.
you just imagine this, if you're like a high level director, or maybe you're some kind of an executive at some company, and you're trying to move up the food chain, you want to make a name for yourself within the company, or you want to make a name for yourself just in general. Maybe you're planning to like position yourself to get either higher profile roles either within that company or elsewhere. It looks really cool to be able to put on your resume, I managed $1 million project and oversaw this and
Mm-hmm.
that with X number of end users, and whoo, we did a lot of work. And
Mm-hmm.
when she told me that, I was like, oh my God, are you serious? She said, yeah, they don't care about it's not their money.
That's
If they,
real.
and see, and this is the point that just rubbed me the
Mm-hmm.
wrong way. And this goes back to my original thought, when I was commenting back on what you said, shame on the client for not, doing that. if the client is some big, huge Fortune 500 company or whatever, and they might have people within the organization who do know better, but they're not the aces in the right places. They might be scattered across an organization that's even geographically scattered across the country. Left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, and the expert that needed to be in that room wasn't in that room.
Wasn't. Yep.
And so the company as an organization is just completely unaware that they've got this director or this person, this self-serving individual in the organization that's making it all look, oh yeah, we got a training program going. Yeah, it's going great. And so maybe like a vice president or someone, oh, good, Biff. Glad you're overseeing that. That's great. They don't know any better. They trust Biff to do the right thing for the organization. But Biff is thinking about his next play, And so meanwhile, he doesn't give a rip if the company doles out $1 million on a training program that's not needed, because he's going to look good. Everybody's going to be good. And then all you need, hey, let's add to that story. Then you bring let's bring, the dancing unicorn guy, watch it shimmer,
Question
see
for
it
you.
glimmer. No, I'm just saying, so these projects are ripe for dudes from the first story to pull up with their glittery stuff, make everything look great. And the people who are not paying attention, but they've got this agenda that she was talking about, they are ripe to pluck something like that. Like, yeah, let's do that. That looks great, because they're thinking about something completely different,
So Rhonda, in your example here, let's just say, is Biff the project manager by chance?
No,
Maybe?
Biff is a decision maker.
Decision maker? Okay.
Biff is a
All right.
decision maker
So,
who doesn't do due diligence to ask the right questions to the right people. And I was
where I was going to go.
Hold on, Kevin. Hold on. To your point about, wrong data, I just wanted to connect that to what you were saying, because that's just one example of how that happens. Because if you have somebody who's inside of the organization who is not very meticulous, and they either are not, or they're either uncaring, not meticulous, or they just fail to look harder and vet the experts upon which they rely to form an opinion.
Yeah.
Then, they may not be as discriminating about the data. They may here's the big point I was going to make too. They may even point the consultant in the wrong direction, and they may withhold tangible information from the consultant that would be material and really impact the needs analysis. So these things happen.
And the comment I was going to make was going to that, what you just said. In your example, Biff, the decision maker, has his own agenda, okay? And he may very well know all of these other ancillary things that should be factored in, but he's not going down that path, because that does not coincide with Biff's agenda. And you made another mention that is so true, and I've seen it, is that certain people who should be in the room are not, okay? Certain SMEs were not invited to this particular party or whatever, because their line of thinking or what they may come up with may not necessarily correlate with the agenda that Biff and maybe a few others have. So your example and point is very well taken.
Yeah, and this brings me back to one of my favorites, Peter Senge. Are you familiar with the book, The Fifth Discipline?
Mm-hmm.
So, he's all about what's best for the organization.
Right.
And if you really want to be a true learning organization, it starts from way at the top, okay? Because people like Biff in organizations don't thrive unless the environment allows them to. you see what I'm saying? And so
Mhm.
leadership from the very tip top has got to be involved, and they've got to keep their thumb on the pulse, and they've got to effectively delegate down to the folks who will then further delegate down. And this message, this way of being, this paradigm for the organization must be disseminated systemically, my favorite word, throughout the
Optimal word.
organization. Yeah,
Yeah.
because otherwise that's where siloing can kind of take over. And when you have siloing, I mean, you're just setting up a good kind of environment for that kind of rogue behavior to happen. And I hate to use the word rogue. Maybe it sounds a bit negative. Maybe it's a bit controversial. And you know what? Sometimes it is, because sometimes this
Mhm.
stuff is literally deliberate. I can't tell you how many times I've literally had people tell me to my face they don't care. They
Mhm.
just don't care. You're going to move forward. You're going to build this anyway because this is what we're doing.
Mhm. This is
So,
my, yeah, right.
yeah, and so I know it's not the easiest thing to do because it requires an incredible amount of attention to the matter. But this is kind of where culture comes back in too.
Mhm.
Is everyone in the company actually walking the walk, or are they just talking the talk about their culture? Because if you are a company that takes learning very seriously, and performance, and organizational development, all the good things that you and I love to talk about, it would be baked into your culture that this nonsense is not going to be tolerated.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I just wanted to comment on what you said, because yeah, that does
Mhm.
happen. And I was really, it upsets me when I witness those things, because
Sure it
I
does.
feel
You take it, yeah.
it's very short-sighted. And I would say that the one thing that I've witnessed in the last couple of decades is that I've noticed that companies can be very short-sighted to the point where they're only looking quarter to quarter to quarter. They're not looking long term. They're not strategizing long term. They're not anticipating the long term gains from the sacrifices that can be made now to secure a stronger future down the line, because they're
Mhm.
just so focused on the next quarter. And that's where situations like what I described, like with the Biffs, they're so focused on the quarters. But in their defense, sometimes people find themselves in a situation where they can only do what they can do within the constraints that they're allowed to maneuver,
Mhm.
because they have someone above them that's a leader, that's pushing down on them, who has yet another leader on top of that leader pushing down on them. So this is why I say it starts at the top and goes down.
It goes even beyond the walls and ceilings of the organization itself. I mean, it extends to perhaps shareholders. A
Oh, yeah,
lot of
yeah.
too.
Oh,
So,
please don't get me
depending on
started
the
on
nature
that.
of the business or whatever, there's yeah, uh,
Yeah, you know what? We
ceiling
could have
goes
a
a little
whole
bit
other
higher.
discussion about that, because, in the wake of the whole Enron situation, this is a complete side note, I'll get off of that, but I remember listening to an interview, a news broadcast way back, remember when Enron all fell apart and everything went
Oh
crazy?
yeah, the magic pencil.
And it was noted that if you look at the CEOs that were at a lot of these companies that were, they were caught red-handed doing bad things.
Hmm.
If you look back to the timeline to when these folks were like getting their MBAs or whatever, they chronologically went back and said, that's interesting. This, they would have been in graduate school once upon a time when all this new focus on serving shareholders became a thing in
Hmm.
MBA schools. And then fast forward to the future here. So they kind of They were cut from that cloth. And
Mhm.
as a result of all the fallout that had happened, well, first, it was the .com, and then there's the .com burst. What was that, about
Mhm.
1999, 2000? And then,
1999.
yeah,
I was on the ground floor of a new .com,
yeah.
fledgling new .com. Yeah,
And then, there's
absolutely.
WorldCom, and then we had the Enron, and then of course the whole housing thing,
Hmm.
all this junk that goes on. Anyway, the person that was being interviewed commented that some of the major schools were bringing back more of an emphasis on ethics classes as a result of what had started to unfold with these CEOs just going rogue, doing
Hmm.
really dumb things. So I just found that quite interesting. It was just something that I remember from back then.
Hmm.
I only said that just to prove the point that it really, really does start at the top. And you are correct that, companies can be influenced by their shareholders' desires and, the things that they're expected to do to meet those asks of them. So, but anyhow, so I wanted to move on to the next thing. We were going to talk about AI a little bit.
Hmm.
So, now, AI. Now we're a whole new thing to talk about. I use AI to help me be more productive. I liken it like this: if if you're in a 5-star restaurant and you have this, award-winning chef, you know, and then you have the line cooks, or the sous chefs, or the people that do the chopping and the slicing and the dicing, the manual stuff, right? Okay, so to me AI is like that. I'm still the chef in my kitchen. I'm still coming up with the primary ideas. I'm still coming up with the frameworks. I'm still using my knowledge, my experience, my years of working with various different companies and industries, and I'm using my expertise and my understanding of my craft to create things. And then, so just like if a chef's going to come up with a fantastic, recipes, because he has a knowledge of spices and foods and temperatures and whatever makes you a great chef. Okay, whatever. I'm just using that analogy. I'm not just throwing AI out there and be like, hey, go build me something blindly.
Hmm.
So a lot of these tools are having AI built into them, and they're really pushing, hey, now you can do this. You can just, with a touch of a button. I'm like, no, you can't. No, I mean, yeah, you can. Yeah, you can do whatever you want. Okay, but how good is that going to be? How can AI possibly know what the learner's needs are? Is
Hmm.
AI going to do your learner needs analysis for you? Would they even know? Does it even know how to begin to do that? You could type something in and ask it, hey, how do you do a learner needs analysis? And of course, it'll scan the interwebs to get the knowledge and the information that's readily available out there, and it can spit you out a Word document to tell you how to go about doing it. But is it actually
Sure.
going to actually do it? I mean, you can use it as a tool to help you do these things,
Hmm.
right? But that's another thing I wanted to kind of throw a cautionary tale out there about.
Hmm.
Don't be so quick to just blindly rely on AI. I'm not being anti AI. I'm not bashing it. It's a very useful, helpful tool. But never, ever, ever, in as long as the day I live, will I ever just throw it out there unchecked. It it
Hmm.
works for me under the framework that I create. I do not just go give it a task and tell it to just build some stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing
I,
more and more people, especially on LinkedIn. It's ironic that we were talking about this today, because I did see something this morning
mm,
where a lady was talking about how disheartened she was to see something recently, where a particular company was kind of pushing the whole idea of how companies can create e-learning in days instead of the normal timeline that it takes, because that's deceptive to make it.
Hmm.
It's already deceptive anyway. People already look at training, oh, well, that couldn't have been that hard. It's like, no, you have no idea what goes into putting this training together. There's conversations that need to be had. There's analysis that need to be done. There's detailed design documents that need to be created. There's storyboarding that has to go into it. We have to consider the audience. We have to consider the technology that we're working with. We've got to consider the logistics of the learning audience. Where are they
Yeah.
located? Is this physical training? Is this online training? What is it? What's going to be the best what's going to be the best mode of delivery? Is asynchronous better than synchronous? Are we dealing with adult learners, or are we what have you even
Yeah.
considered adult learning theory? I mean, it's just so involved, and it really just burns me to see people bastardize the work that we do. And just because there's AI, they literally want to just throw it out there like, oh, you can just throw something together in a number of days. Really?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, Rhonda. And I think the general, uh, you know, conception of AI, and it's ever so evolving. I mean, it's just, I mean, every other day. I mean, there's just it's a new level of explaining its use and all. But right now, I think there's just an overall feeling or thinking that AI is now your new microwave oven for spewing out things, for cooking that meal in seconds. Okay, but there's still a level of time, input, energy, analysis, if you will, as it relates to training that has to go into it that AI isn't going to necessarily solve for you or provide for you in a microwave, nanosecond, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and I love your analogy with regards to being a chef using it. AI perhaps has the ingredients that you'll need to use for the meals that you're preparing or whatever. But you know, if it's not utilized in the correct way, perhaps the information or the meal may not taste well. Okay, and the
Mm-hmm.
information may not necessarily be accurate because the chef didn't apply the ingredients correctly. Okay, and
Yeah.
so I love your analogy. I think it makes perfect sense.
I like your analogy about the microwave oven because it's perfect. Like, okay, your meal might be quick and tasty, but I don't know how nutritional it's going to be.
There you go.
And in this case, the nutrition would be the learning, because
Yes.
you can create content.
Mhm.
Anybody can create content, but is it going to actually solve a learning problem? Is it just empty calories?
Empty
Since we're on the
calorie. Oh boy.
since we're on the
Let's
chef
just
and the
keep this thing
microwave.
going. Right.
Kevin, I think you need breakfast, right? You already told me
Yeah.
you hadn't had your
Getting
coffee this
hungry.
morning.
I hadn't, and nor did I have breakfast yet. So let's keep this moving.
But that's the thing. It's just.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was my bone to pick today. Was
By the
I
way, I
I
need to throw you a bone on this very topic and subject because I've learned so much from you um, this year. In your use of AI, you use it masterfully, and one of these days I'm going to talk you into creating a training on how to properly use AI because I think you're doing a fantastic job with it in our business.
oh
Um,
well I appreciate that compliment, but I got to tell you, I mean, there's so many other people to learn from better than me. Because I primarily use AI to help me stay organized, and I'll
mhm.
have an idea about I use it mainly like for marketing and stuff, and
Sure.
coming up with
Yep.
business development plans, which I've shared with you. And it's
Right.
wonderful for that. Um, and that's what I'm saying. I have an idea, or I'll ask it for ideas, and I'll work with it collaboratively, but ultimately, I'm making the final decision about what's going to get put out there. I am editing anything, I'm writing.
Hmm.
I'm not just throwing out AI written crap out there like, oh, look, here's my thing. And it's just like, oh, it just annoys me. I told you recently, I had that thing that I was involved with recently, which I don't want to say. I told you I was like
Hmm.
really super frustrated where some
Yeah.
folks were just like, "Oh, here's our piece of the project."
Right.
And it's like it's so clearly AI. It's like, "Oh, you didn't even
Mhm.
bother to remove the little emoticons that AI threw in there. You know how it likes to throw in these little
Hmm.
emoticons? Like you didn't even bother to like clean this up. You didn't even bother to like look at it and try to put it in your own words or edit
Which
it or
exposed, yeah, which exposed that individual. Absolutely.
yeah, and so, so
Hmm.
my I guess my final thing is don't be lazy. Don't be
Yeah, you
lazy.
can't.
Don't be
Yeah.
lazy from beginning to end of this conversation. We started off with, don't be lazy by not doing your needs analysis. Don't be lazy by
Mhm.
just assuming everything's going to be solved with training. Don't be lazy by not putting the right people in the right room to make the right decisions. Don't be a lazy leader by not leading from the top down to make sure that your organization is doing things properly. And by God, for the love of everything sacred, don't be lazy using AI and you think you're
Mhm.
just going to like throw it an idea and it's just going to crank out this beautiful masterpiece thing that's just completely
Yeah.
accurate and isn't just
Yeah.
empty calories. So I guess that, yeah, that's my
Not.
big
It's
old
not going to be an applicable. It's not going to be an applicable shortcut to everything. Uh,
yeah.
you can't
So
just toss it in the microwave for everything that you're working on. So.
I mean, I know it sounds like a bit of a rant that I had today, but honestly, I do care so much about this work that I do, and I care about the companies and the clients that I work with. And
Hmm.
even if you're not a client of mine and you're just out there listening to this, please, I implore you, don't fall into these traps. And if
Hmm.
you if you are looking to hire someone to develop some training for you, whether it's us or somebody else, put them to task, grill them, put them to task, grill them. Make sure they know what they're doing. Make sure it's not just a shop that's like put an instructional design sign on the front of their building, but they really don't have the background to back it up because you will be paying for a lot of really potentially nice looking content that may not solve your performance problem at all. And you'll be out money and time and could, in worst case scenarios, potentially damage employee morale. So,
And stuck with flavor of the month.
yeah, and not only stuck with
My
flavor of the
favorite
month, but
term.
still stuck with the same damn problem that you started off with.
Here you go.
But yet you're
Yes.
just out some money. It's just, and I mean I know some really good people in this field, and if I had to, I could make recommendations, you know, but there are also some little, ne'er do wells out there that they're just in it for the money, and they're just a warehousing type of outfit where they're just bringing in people and they're just getting projects and they're just putting butts in chairs and they don't oversee. I mean,
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
it's a shame. And if you don't have someone, and I don't have anything against people who are like, staffing companies that are specifically focused on learning. That's cool. But it would be great if those companies had someone on board on their staff that was a hand holder and a liaison between the contractors that they send to the company, and that they have a hand in the project itself so that they know that the instructional designers that they sent are actually fully vetted, they know what they're doing, and they're producing high quality outputs.
Hmm.
There is one company in particular that I'm thinking of that I've actually worked for that does a good job of doing that. But like I said, I'm not naming names, but anybody who's just be on the lookout for that. Don't just fall into, because there are some really huge, massive companies that all they do is just recruit anybody off the street, and the people who are recruiting don't have any knowledge at all whatsoever about learning and development. They don't even understand the jobs that they're recruiting for, and or that that they're filling, and they just, I don't know, man. That's why I got out of the game and I started my own business, because I just was like, I got tired of being a part of that rat race, and I got tired of just seeing some of some of the worst practitioners I've met out there, like, and companies not getting what they were paid for in terms of the quality, and just, yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna get off that. I don't want to be all negative. I don't mean to be
Well,
negative. I'm actually very quite positive, and I do
I mean,
believe.
your comments are very sage and sound.
Yeah, and
Um,
and I
you're
want
just
to end
back.
on a yeah, I want to end on a positive note. I believe that things can be better. This is why I wanted to have this conversation today, because I
Mhm.
want people to be aware. I want them to know, hey, you don't have to just take whatever comes, ask questions. Please ask questions before you spend your money, you know. Um, and I'm the kind of person where I want things to be right in the world, I know that sounds Pollyanna, but just like when we had the conversation the other day, and I put together that pretty comprehensive list of things to consider for that person,
Mhm.
I'm thinking, I wonder if I should put together a list of like what to look for when you're hiring a learning and development firm, just to put it
Mhm.
out there so that companies, don't get caught up in this hot mess of mediocrity that has
Yeah.
become a lot of learning, a lot of what gets pushed off as learning out there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that they can save their money, or rather use their money more efficiently, more effectively, and get the outcomes that they actually need and desire. Um, and I have no problem doing that, because I feel like what goes around comes around. And if you put that value out there, not only is it good for the companies, but it's good for our industry, because I think
Mhm.
it raises the bar, and it
Mhm.
helps people have a better understanding of what quality should look like, so that they can
Yeah.
hold more of these folks to account.
Yeah.
That's my hope. That's my
Yeah. Well,
dream.
yeah, Rhonda, I look at that as a deed that is being paid, you know, forward, if you will. And I
Mm-hmm.
do believe those types of things do come back. So I think it was a great bone to pick today, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of
Yeah. Well,
great things
thanks.
that you shared with us.
Thanks for your contribution as well, and for bringing up some good highlights that we could also, tag on to. And so I guess we'll call it a wrap for today. And again, I'm Rhonda, and this is Kevin, and this is the Wolfpack Rise and Howl podcast. And if you want to contact us, we can be reached at www.whitewolfinc.com. Our website will be in the description. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. And if you've found value in today's podcast, please give us a like if you're on YouTube, and a share would be great. And leave us some comments and let us know what you would like for us to talk about.
Thank you again, Rhonda.
All right.
Appreciate this episode.
Until next time, see y'all later.